Earth's Ruthless Retaliation, left the Galactic Council in silence. Part 1. The meeting room at Terminus Prime Station felt cold despite the careful temperature controls. Ambassador Elizabeth Morgan sat at the long table, surrounded by delegates from hundreds of alien species. She had been waiting for 3 hours to present Earth's proposal. 3 long hours while other species discussed trade routes and mining rights. Elizabeth was a patient woman. She had spent 3 years in this role, learning the complex politics of the Galactic Council. She understood that humans were newcomers here. Earth had only joined the Council 5 years ago. Most of these species had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, but patience had its limits. Finally, the Council speaker called her name. Elizabeth stood and walked to the center platform. Around her, holographic displays showed her face to thousands of delegates across the massive chamber. She took a breath and began her presentation. Honored Council members, Earth requests permission to establish 3 new colonies in the outer regions. Our population continues to grow, and we need space for our people. These worlds are uninhabited and far from any claimed territories. We believe this is a reasonable request. Before she could continue, a harsh voice interrupted her. Reasonable? You humans think you can just take whatever you want? The speaker was Krathnor, the Zelvian delegate. The Zelvians were a powerful reptilian species who controlled a large empire in this sector. Krathnor stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scales gleaming under the chamber lights. His eyes, cold and yellow, fixed on Elizabeth with clear contempt. Elizabeth kept her voice steady. We are following proper council procedures. The request is within established guidelines. Krathnor laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. You primitives have been in space for barely a century. You have 1 colony, 1 tiny settlement, and you think you deserve more? Your military is a joke. Your technology is ancient. You should be grateful we even let you into the council. Around the chamber, other delegates remained silent. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke in Earth's defense. Elizabeth felt her jaw tighten, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. With respect, Delegate Krathnor, Earth has contributed significantly to Council research and development. Our scientists have made several breakthroughs in medical technology that have benefited many species. Medical technology, Krathnor sneered. How quaint. Come back when you have real power, human. Request denied. He made a dismissive gesture and sat down. The council speaker looked at Elizabeth with something that might have been sympathy. The request is denied. Next item on the agenda. Elizabeth returned to her seat, anger burning in her chest. But there was nothing more she could do here. Not today. Thousands of light years away, Captain Daniel Price stood on the bridge of the research vessel Aurora. Below his ship, the colony of New Haven spread across the green valleys of Kepler 442b. It was a beautiful sight. 50,000 humans called this place home. They had farms, schools, and small cities. Children played in parks. Families built their futures here. Daniel was young for a ship captain, only 32 years old. But he had proven himself capable during the colony's early days. The Aurora was not a warship. It was designed for research and support operations. Its crew of 200 scientists and technicians helped the colonists below with everything from weather prediction to communications. Captain, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. Lieutenant Maya Curtis called from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, a sharp woman who never missed anything on her sensors. Distance approximately 10 million kilometers and closing. Daniel frowned. They were not expecting any visitors. Can you identify them? Maya worked her controls, her expression growing concerned. Sir, I'm reading 23 contacts. Configuration matches Zelvian warships. Heavy cruiser class. Zelvian? Daniel felt his stomach drop. This is human territory. What are they doing here? He moved to the communications panel. Open a channel. Let's find out what they want. Maya tried, but shook her head. They're not responding to hails, Captain. And sir, they're charging weapons. Time seemed to slow down. Daniel stared at the display screen, watching the red icons of the Zelvian fleet move closer. His mind raced through options. The Aurora had defensive shields and a few point defense weapons, but nothing that could stand against military warships. He could run, try to escape, but that would leave the colony undefended. Sound general alert, Daniel ordered. All hands to emergency stations. Maya, send an emergency transmission to Earth. Tell them we're under attack. Send everything, all sensor data, visual records, everything. Yes, sir. Maya's fingers flew across her controls. Transmission away. And Captain, the colony is hailing us. They want to know what's happening. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. 50,000 people down there, families, children. What could he tell them? Inform the colony to begin evacuation procedures. Get everyone into the shelters. The Zelvian fleet emerged from hyperspace like a nightmare made real. 23 massive warships, each one bristling with weapons. They formed an attack formation around the planet. The lead ship was larger than the others, clearly the flagship. Captain, they're locking weapons on us, Maya reported, her voice tight with fear. Evasive maneuvers, Daniel ordered. Try to keep between them and the colony. The Aurora turned, its engine straining. But it was like a rabbit trying to fight a pack of wolves. The first energy beam struck their shields, overloading them instantly. The second beam tore through the ship's hull, ripping through decks and compartments. Alarms screamed throughout the vessel. Daniel pulled himself up from where the impact had thrown him. Around the bridge, consoles sparked and smoked. He could see stars through a crack in the hull. The ship was dying. Maya, are you still transmitting to Earth? He called out. She nodded, blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead. Yes, sir. Real-time feed. They're seeing everything. Good, Daniel said. He looked at the view screen, watching as the Zelvian ships began bombarding the planet below. Bright flashes of light marked where their weapons struck. Cities, farms, schools. Everything humanity had built here was being destroyed. The Aurora shuddered as another blast hit. The lights went out, replaced by emergency red lighting. Daniel knew they had only moments left. Captain, Maya said quietly, it's been an honor serving with you. The honor was mine, Lieutenant. Daniel gripped the arms of his chair. The view screen showed the planet burning below. 50,000 people, gone or dying, and there was nothing he could do to save them. The final blast from the Zelvian flagship turned the Aurora into an expanding cloud of debris. The transmission to Earth continued for another few seconds, showing the systematic destruction of New Haven before it too cut to static. On Earth, in the deep underground command center that housed the Defense Fleet headquarters, Admiral Connor Blake watched the transmission end. The room was silent except for the quiet sound of weeping. Hardened military officers, people who had seen combat and death, cried as they watched the destruction of New Haven. Blake was 58 years old. He had served in the military for 40 years. He had fought in the resource wars, commanded ships in the Belt conflicts, and helped establish humanity's first defensive fleet. He thought he had seen everything war could offer. He was wrong. His hands gripped the edge of the console so hard his knuckles turned white. On the screen, the automated satellites around Kepler 442b continued broadcasting. The Zelvian ships were thorough. They burned every structure, every farm, every settlement. The bombardment continued for 4 hours. When it ended, New Haven was gone. Nothing remained but ash and melted glass. Blake's second-in-command, General Patricia Howard, stood beside him. Her face was pale, her jaw set. Admiral, what are your orders? Blake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was cold and steady, each word precise and clear. Recall all our ships from Council space immediately. Every vessel, every person back to Earth within 48 hours. Cut all communications with the Galactic Council. Total information blackout. Yes, sir, Patricia said. And then? Blake turned to face his command staff. Officers from every branch of Earth's military stood waiting. He saw the anger in their eyes, the grief, the desire for justice. He felt it too, burning in his chest like a fire that would never go out. Activate Project Odin. Full mobilization. Contact the Joint Chiefs and the civilian government. Tell them we need an emergency session within the hour. He paused, making sure everyone understood. The Zelvians wanted to see what humanity is capable of when pushed too far. They murdered 50,000 of our civilians. They destroyed our colony. They killed Captain Price and his entire crew. Blake's voice dropped lower but somehow became even more intense. They're about to learn a very important lesson. They're about to discover that humanity doesn't forget. We don't forgive. And we sure as hell don't back down. We're going to show them exactly what we're capable of. We're going to make them regret the day they decided to attack us. He looked at the screen one last time, at the ruins of New Haven. Somewhere in that destruction were the bodies of 50,000 people who had just wanted to build a peaceful life among the stars. Children who would never grow up. Parents who would never see. Earth's Ruthless Retaliation. Left the Galactic Council in silence part. To Ambassador Elizabeth Morgan stood in the Galactic Council chambers one last time. The massive room, which could hold thousands of delegates, seemed emptier now. Or perhaps it was just her perception. Everything felt different after New Haven. She walked to the central platform, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The delegates watched her with expressions ranging from pity to smugness. Krathnor, the Zelvian who had mocked humanity just days before the attack, sat in his usual seat looking pleased with himself. Elizabeth did not address him. She did not address any of them specifically. She simply spoke, her voice calm and clear. Earth withdraws from all Galactic Council activities effective immediately. We will handle the situation regarding our colony through internal means. All Council species are advised to avoid human space until further notice. That is all. The Council speaker stood up, confusion clear on his face. Ambassador Morgan, surely we should discuss this. The Council can provide mediation, perhaps arrange compensation for your losses. Elizabeth looked at him. Her eyes were cold in a way they had never been before. 50,000 people are dead. 200 crew members were murdered. Our colony was burned to nothing. And not one of you said a word. Not one species called for action against the Zelvians. So no, we will not be discussing anything. Good day, she turned and left. Behind her, the Council erupted in confused chatter. Krathnor laughed. The humans run away with their tails between their legs. As expected from such a weak species, other Zelvian delegates joined his laughter. They saw this as a victory, proof of their strength and human weakness. They did not understand what was actually happening. They could not imagine what was coming. Elizabeth boarded her shuttle and left Terminus Prime. As the station shrank behind her, she allowed herself one moment of emotion. Tears ran down her face, not from sadness or fear but from rage. She had spent 3 years building relationships with these people, trying to earn their respect for humanity. All of it meant nothing, but she dried her tears quickly. There was work to do. Earth needed every capable person now. She set the autopilot for home and began reviewing the classified files Admiral Blake had sent her. What she read made her understand why the Admiral had been so calm after New Haven. Humanity had not been unprepared. They had simply been waiting, hoping this day would never come. On Earth, in a facility hidden deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, General Patricia Howard walked through corridors that officially did not exist. She had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. 20 years building Project Odin while everyone told her it was unnecessary, that humanity would never face a major threat, that the Council would protect them. She had been right to ignore them. She had been right to prepare. The only regret she had was that her preparations came too late to save New Haven. Patricia entered the main operations room. Hundreds of technicians worked at stations, bringing decades of secret research into active deployment. On massive screens, she could see the various components of Project Odin coming online across the solar system. Dr. Alan Cross met her at the central console. He was the chief scientist of the project, a brilliant man who had dedicated his career to developing weapons that the galaxy believed were impossible. General, all systems are activating according to schedule. The weapon fabrication facilities are running at full capacity. We can have the first wave of munitions ready in 3 weeks. Make it 2 weeks, Patricia said. The Admiral wants to move fast. We need to hit them before they have time to prepare. Alan nodded. We can do that. General, the weapons we've developed, they're devastating. The kill vehicles alone can strike targets at 90% light speed. The fusion warheads have yields in the gigaton range. The swarm drones can overwhelm any point defense system. Are we really going to use all of this? Patricia looked at him. Yes, all of it. The Zelvians killed 50,000 civilians. They need to understand that actions have consequences. They need to learn that humanity will not tolerate attacks on our people. In another part of the facility, Commander Ryan Phillips stood with his squadron in a hangar that held ships unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The fighters were sleek and black, designed for one purpose: to be completely invisible to enemy sensors. They used technology based on quantum mechanics, creating a field that bent detection waves around the ship. Ryan was 40 years old, a veteran pilot who had been recruited into the Ghost Squadron program 8 years ago. Since then, he had trained for missions that everyone hoped would never happen. Now those missions were real. Listen up, he addressed his team. Our job is to take out the Zelvian command structure. We go in first before the main fleet. We hit their high command station, their communications networks, their military leadership. We do it fast, we do it clean, and we do it without mercy. These people murdered an entire colony. Remember that when you pull the trigger." His pilots nodded. They had all seen the footage from New Haven. The images were burned into their minds. Cities reduced to craters, schools destroyed with children still inside, families killed in their homes. Every pilot in the squadron had volunteered for this mission. They wanted justice for New Haven. In the intelligence division, Lieutenant Commander Sophie Grant sat surrounded by holographic displays. For the past 6 years, she had been mapping the Zelvian Empire. Every military base, every shipyard, every strategic facility. She knew where they kept their weapons, where they built their ships, where their leaders lived. When the order came to activate Project Odin, Sophie had been ready. She presented her complete intelligence package to Admiral Blake within hours. 47 major military installations, 12 shipyards, 73 resource facilities, complete maps of the Zelvian defense networks, everything humanity needed to dismantle the Empire. Sophie did not feel guilty about what was coming. She thought about the children of New Haven, the families who had built homes on that world, who had planted gardens and started businesses and made plans for the future. All of them dead because the Zelvians wanted to teach humanity a lesson. Well, humanity was about to teach the Zelvians a lesson in return. Admiral Blake convened a meeting with Earth's leadership. The President, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the heads of the major governments all gathered in a secure conference room. Blake presented the situation clearly and without emotion. The Zelvian Empire has committed an act of genocide against humanity. 50,000 civilians dead. Our colony completely destroyed. The Galactic Council has refused to take action. Therefore, Earth will respond independently. I am requesting authorization for a full military campaign against the Zelvian Empire, with the goal of completely eliminating their capacity to wage war. The President, a woman named Victoria Kent, looked at the intelligence reports. She had been in office for 3 years. She had always advocated for peaceful coexistence with the alien species. But this changed everything. Admiral, are you proposing the complete destruction of the Zelvian military? Yes, Madam President. Not their civilians, not their culture, but their military capacity. Every base, every ship, every weapon. We dismantle their empire so completely that they will never threaten anyone again. The Council will condemn us, one of the chiefs pointed out. Blake nodded. Yes, they will. But they did nothing when the Zelvians murdered our people. Their opinion no longer matters. What matters is ensuring that no one ever thinks they can attack humanity without consequences. The room was silent for a long moment. Then President Kent spoke. I call for a vote. All in favor of authorizing military action against the Zelvian Empire? Every hand went up. Not a single dissenting voice. The decision was unanimous and absolute. Authorization granted, the President said. Admiral Blake, you have full authority to conduct this operation as you see fit. Do what needs to be done. For New Haven, Blake repeated. Across the solar system, hidden facilities began full production. Shipyards in the asteroid belt, concealed for 20 years, activated. Massive vessels built in secret and never registered with any galactic authority, prepared for launch. These were not exploration ships or research vessels. These were warships, designed by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing. The Galactic Council had assumed humanity was primitive because humans did not use the standard Council technology. They did not understand that humanity had been forced to innovate, to develop their own solutions to problems because Council technology was restricted from newer members. What the Council saw as primitive was actually advanced in ways they could not comprehend. Human physics, human mathematics, human engineering, all applied to the singular problem of warfare. The result was a fleet that could match or exceed anything the major powers possessed. 6 weeks after the destruction of New Haven, Admiral Blake stood on the bridge of the Retribution. The flagship was massive, larger than any human vessel that had ever flown. Around it, 300 warships waited in formation. Each one carried weapons that could level cities. Each captain had their orders and their targets. Blake looked at the holographic display showing the Zelvian Empire. Red markers indicated every target they would hit. Earth's Ruthless Retaliation left the Galactic Council in Silence Part 3. The attack began at exactly 0400 hours Galactic Standard Time. Commander Ryan Phillips and his Ghost Squadron materialized from hyperspace near the Zelvian High Command Station. Their stealth systems were active. To every sensor in the system, they were invisible. Ghosts that existed only to deliver death? Ryan looked at his tactical display. The High Command Station was massive, a structure the size of a small moon. Inside it, the entire Zelvian military leadership conducted their operations. Admirals, generals, strategic planners, all the people who had ordered the attack on New Haven, all the people who thought humanity was too weak to fight back. Ghost Squadron, arm weapons, Ryan ordered. Target confirmed. Remember, we make this clean. No second chances. On my mark. 12 fighters armed their payloads. Each one carried a fusion warhead with a yield measured in gigatons. Enough power to shatter a moon. They had 12 of them aimed at one station. Mark, Ryan said. 12 missiles launched simultaneously. They crossed the distance to the station in seconds. The Zelvians never saw them coming. Their sensors never detected the approach. The first warning they had was when the warheads detonated. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The High Command Station simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a symbol of Zelvian power and military might. The next moment there was only an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. Every admiral, every general, every strategic mind in the Zelvian military was vaporized instantly. Target destroyed, Ryan reported, moving to secondary objectives. But the Ghost Squadron was just the opening move. At that exact moment, in 46 other systems across the Zelvian Empire, human strike forces emerged from hyperspace. Each force knew its target. Each force executed its mission with cold precision. Captain Lauren Mitchell commanded the destroyer Vengeance as it dropped out of hyperspace near Scarval Prime. This system housed the largest Zelvian shipyard, a massive orbital construction facility where hundreds of warships were being built. It was the heart of Zelvian military production. Lauren was 35 years old and had been in space combat for 15 years. She had trained for this her entire career. Now looking at the shipyard through her view screen, she felt nothing but grim determination. All ships launch gravitational disruptors on my mark, she ordered her battle group. We hit them hard and fast. No survivors, the Zelvian defense fleet tried to respond. 20 warships moved to intercept the human vessels. But they were too slow. The gravitational disruptors launched. Invisible weapons that manipulated space-time itself. They struck the shipyard's artificial gravity wells, the fields that held the massive structure together. Physics did the rest. The shipyard tore itself apart as competing gravity fields ripped through it. Metal screamed and twisted. The 300 warships in various stages of construction were crushed or flung into space. Explosions rippled through the facility as fuel tanks ruptured and power cores overloaded. In 6 minutes, the entire shipyard was destroyed. Decades of construction, billions of credits and resources all reduced to debris. Lauren checked her tactical display. The Zelvian defense fleet was in disarray, unable to coordinate without proper communication from their command structure. All ships engage hostile forces, show them what human weapons can do. Across the Zelvian Empire, similar scenes played out. Human forces struck with overwhelming power and precision. They targeted military bases, weapons depots, communications arrays, anything that supported the Zelvian war machine. The attacks were coordinated down to the second, ensuring maximum chaos and minimal Zelvian response. War Chief Scarreth was aboard his flagship when the reports started coming in. At first, he did not believe them. Attacks in 47 systems simultaneously? Impossible. No species had the resources to conduct such an operation. Certainly not the humans, but the reports kept coming. The High Command Station destroyed. The main shipyard at Scarval Prime gone. Defense platforms across the Empire going offline. Communication networks failing. His carefully organized military was falling into chaos. How is this possible? He demanded of his tactical officer. Where did they get this fleet? Where did they get these weapons? The officer shook his head, clearly terrified. We don't know, sir. Our intelligence showed the humans had only a small defensive fleet. These ships, these weapons, they're not in any of our databases. It's like they appeared from nowhere. Scarreth felt something he had not experienced in decades of military service. Fear. Real genuine fear. The humans had been hiding their true capabilities. They had let the galaxy think they were weak while secretly building a war machine that could challenge the greatest empires. Get me in contact with our fleets. We need to organize a defense. Sir, communications are down. The humans are jamming everything. We can't reach anyone, Scareth understood then. This was not just a military strike. This was systematic dismantlement. The humans were not trying to win a battle. They were destroying the Zelvian Empire's ability to fight at all. Aboard the Retribution, Admiral Blake watched the operations unfold. His command center displayed tactical data from all 47 strike zones. Green indicators showed completed objectives. Yellow showed operations in progress. There were no red indicators, no failures. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. His second-in-command, Kevin Ross, reported from his station. Admiral, all primary targets have been neutralized. Zelvian command and control is completely disrupted. Their fleets are scattered and unable to coordinate. Casualty estimates for their military are in the hundreds of thousands. Blake nodded. Good. Begin Phase 2. Target their industrial capacity. Every factory, every refinery, every resource extraction operation that supports their military. Take them all down, Kevin hesitated. Sir, if we destroy their industrial base, millions of civilians could be affected. Food production, medical supplies, basic infrastructure, it all depends on those facilities. Blake's expression did not change. I am aware of that, Commander. But the Zelvians showed no concern for civilian casualties when they burned New Haven. They killed every man, woman, and child in that colony. They destroyed homes, schools, hospitals. They showed no mercy, so neither will we. Execute Phase 2. Kevin nodded and relayed the orders. Across the fleet, human captains adjusted their targeting priorities. The second wave of attacks would be even more devastating than the first. At the Galactic Council on Terminus Prime, news of the human assault was just beginning to arrive. The council chambers erupted in chaos as delegates received reports from their intelligence services. The species that had sat silent while New Haven burned now scrambled to understand what was happening. Delegate Velnar, an Aravan who had always advocated for peaceful solutions, stood to address the council. This is unprecedented. The humans are conducting a massive military operation against a council member species. We must intervene immediately. But other delegates were not so sure. One of them, a Thraxian named Zoral, pointed out the obvious problem. And do what exactly? The humans have just demonstrated military capabilities that rival our own. If we move against them, we could find ourselves next on their target list. They destroyed an entire colony, someone argued. The Zelvians committed genocide. And the council did nothing, Zoral replied. We sat here and debated while 50,000 humans died. Now humanity is responding the only way they know how, with overwhelming force. Can we really blame them? The debate raged for hours, but no consensus emerged. The council, which had maintained peace for 2,000 years through careful diplomacy, was paralyzed by fear. They had never encountered a species like humanity before, a species that would go from peaceful cooperation to total war in a matter of weeks, a species that had the capability to back up that decision with devastating military force. Krathnor, the Zelvian delegate who had mocked humanity, tried desperately to rally support for intervention, but his words fell on deaf ears. The other species remembered his arrogance, his dismissal of human concerns. Now they watched as his empire burned, and they wondered if humanity would turn their weapons on anyone else who threatened them. Commander Ryan Phillips returned to the Retribution after 18 hours of continuous operations. His Ghost Squadron had eliminated every high-value target on their list. Military academies, research facilities, weapons development centers, all destroyed. The Zelvian military had lost not just its current leadership, but an entire generation of future commanders. Ryan was exhausted but satisfied. He had personally led the strike on the academy where Zelvian officers were trained. The same academy that had produced the commanders who ordered the attack on New Haven. That academy would never train another soldier. He reported to Admiral Blake on the flag bridge. Sir, all Ghost Squadron objectives completed. Total destruction of Zelvian command infrastructure. They have no effective leadership remaining. Their fleets are scattered and operating independently. Blake looked at him with an expression that might have been satisfaction. Well done, Commander. Get some rest. We'll need you for Phase 3. Ryan nodded and left. As he walked to his quarters, he thought about Captain Daniel Price and the crew of the Aurora. Earth's Ruthless Retaliation. Left the Galactic Council in silence. Part 4. Captain Gregory Stone stood on the bridge of his heavy cruiser, watching Zelvia Prime grow larger on the view screen. The Zelvian homeworld was beautiful from orbit. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in complex patterns. It looked peaceful. It looked like a place where billions of people lived their lives, went to work, raised families, made plans for the future. Gregory was 48 years old and had served in the military for 30 years. He had fought in 3 separate conflicts and commanded ships in countless operations. But this was different. This was not a battle. This was judgment. His battle group consisted of 50 heavy cruisers, each one carrying enough firepower to sterilize a continent. But their orders were specific: destroy military targets only. The Zelvian government complex, the planetary defense grid, military bases and weapons facilities. Civilian cities were off limits unless they contained military installations. Admiral Blake had been clear about this point. Humanity was not interested in genocide despite what the Zelvians had done to New Haven. This was about removing the Zelvian capacity to wage war, not about killing civilians. It was a fine distinction, but one that Blake insisted upon. They would be ruthless, but they would not be monsters. Gregory opened a channel to broadcast on all Zelvian frequencies. He made sure his message would reach every radio, every television, every communication device on the planet. This is Captain Gregory Stone of the Earth Defense Fleet. In 6 hours, we will destroy every military installation on Zelvia Prime. This includes your planetary defense grid, your government complex, and all military bases. Civilians in these areas must evacuate immediately. I repeat, evacuate all military zones within 6 hours. We are not targeting civilian populations, but anyone remaining in military areas will be considered hostile. This is your only warning. The transmission ended. On the planet below, chaos erupted. The Zelvian government, what remained of it after the destruction of the High Command, scrambled to respond. Should they believe the humans? Was this some kind of trick? But as the minutes passed and the human fleet made no aggressive moves, some Zelvians began to evacuate. Workers fled from the government complex. Military personnel abandoned their bases, unsure whether to fight or run. Civilians who lived near military installations packed what they could carry and left their homes. War Chief Scarreth watched all of this from his flagship in orbit. His ship was heavily damaged from earlier battles, barely able to maintain position. Most of his fleet was gone, destroyed or scattered across the Empire. He had maybe 30 vessels left, and most of those were damaged. He could not fight the human fleet. He did not have the ships or the weapons. Any attack would be suicide. But could he really just sit here and watch as the humans destroyed his homeworld? His tactical officer interrupted his thoughts. War Chief, the human fleet is holding position. They're not attacking, they're really waiting for the evacuation. Scarreth found this hard to believe. Why would they warn us? Why give us time to evacuate? I don't know, sir. But they're holding their fire. The countdown continues, but no weapons are charged. Scarreth thought about the human colony he had destroyed. He had given no warning, no chance to evacuate. He had simply opened fire and killed everyone. The humans could do the same now. They could burn every city on Zelvia Prime without warning. They had the power, but they chose not to. Perhaps that was the real message. Not just that humanity could destroy the Zelvian Empire, but that they chose to do it with more honor than the Zelvians had shown. They were demonstrating that they were better, even in war. 6 hours passed. Gregory Stone watched his chronometer count down the final seconds. Reports from the surface indicated that most military zones had been evacuated. Some stubborn officials remained, refusing to leave their posts. That was their choice. He had given them warning. He had given them time. His conscience was clear. Time's up, he said quietly. All ships, target your assigned zones. Fire on my command. 50 heavy cruisers adjusted their positions. Their weapons, massive particle, beam cannons capable of burning through any armor, locked onto targets across Zelvia Prime, the planetary defense grid, the government complex, military bases in 12 different locations, everything that gave the Zelvian Empire the ability to wage war. Fire. Beams of concentrated energy lanced down from orbit. They struck with such force that the impacts were visible from space. The government complex, a massive structure that had stood for 500 years, simply vaporized. One moment it was there, a symbol of Zelvian power and authority. The next moment, there was only a crater glowing with residual heat. The planetary defense grid died next. Orbital platforms and ground-based weapons installations were systematically destroyed. Each shot was precise, calculated to cause maximum damage to military targets while avoiding nearby civilian areas. Where this was impossible, the human fleet used smaller, more accurate weapons to minimize collateral damage. Military bases across the planet burned. Training facilities, weapons depots, command centers all reduced to rubble. The bombardment continued for 2 hours. By the end, the Zelvian Empire's homeworld was defenseless. They had no planetary shields, no weapons batteries, no military infrastructure at all. But the cities stood. The hospitals, the schools, the homes, all untouched. Gregory looked at the damage assessment. Estimated civilian casualties: 12,000, mostly people who refused to evacuate or were unable to leave in time. It was a tragedy, but nothing compared to what could have been. The human fleet could have killed billions. They chose not to. Gregory opened a channel to Admiral Blake aboard the Retribution. "Admiral, bombardment complete. All military targets destroyed. The Zelvian homeworld is defenseless. Civilian casualties minimal. Awaiting further orders." Blake's voice came through clearly. "Well done, Captain. Hold position. I'm going to make a broadcast." 20 days after the human assault began, Admiral Connor Blake prepared to address the galaxy. He stood on the bridge of the Retribution, positioned above Zelvia Prime. Around him, the 300 ships of the human fleet held formation. They were battered from weeks of combat, but they were intact. They had accomplished their mission. Blake activated the fleet-wide broadcast system, but this time, he opened it on all frequencies in all languages across every inhabited system in the galaxy. He wanted everyone to hear this. Every species, every government, every individual who might one day consider threatening humanity. "This is Admiral Connor Blake of Earth," he began, his voice calm and measured. 20 days ago, the Zelvian Empire murdered 50,000 human civilians. They destroyed our colony at New Haven without warning, without provocation, without mercy. They killed Captain Daniel Price and his crew of 200 aboard the Aurora. They did this to teach humanity a lesson about our place in the galaxy. He paused, looking at the planet below. Today, the Zelvian Empire no longer has the capacity to threaten anyone. We have destroyed their military, their shipyards, their industrial base, and their government. We did this in 20 days. We did this while the Galactic Council sat in their chambers and debated. We did this alone. His voice hardened. Let me be absolutely clear about what this means. Humanity came to the stars seeking peace. We joined your council in good faith. We followed your rules. We respected your traditions. And when our people were massacred, when our children were burned alive in their schools, your council did nothing. You sat and watched while we grieved. So we took matters into our own hands. We showed the Zelvian Empire what happens when you attack humanity. We showed them mercy they never showed us. We warned them before we fired. We gave civilians time to evacuate. We targeted only military assets. But make no mistake, we were thorough. The Zelvian Empire will never threaten anyone again. Blake's eyes seemed to look through the camera, directly at everyone watching. This is your lesson, Galaxy. Earth will defend itself. Earth will protect its people. Earth will ensure that justice is done. And anyone, any species, any empire that threatens human lives will face the same fate as the Zelvians. We did not want to be warriors. You made us this way. We wanted to be explorers, scientists, artists, friends. But if you bring war to our door, we will bring devastation to yours. He let the silence stretch for a moment. Humanity is withdrawing from Galactic Council space. We will maintain our own territories. We will protect our own people. And we will respond to any aggression with overwhelming force. Remember New Haven. Remember what happened when you pushed us too far. Remember this day. because we will never forget. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, billions of people had heard his words. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer a minor species to be dismissed or bullied. They were a major power, and they had proven it in the most brutal way possible. At the Galactic Council, the delegates sat in stunned silence. Many of them had watched the destruction of Zelvia Prime's military infrastructure in real time. They had seen the precision of the human attacks, the power of human weapons, the discipline of human forces, and they understood now that everything had changed. The Council had maintained peace for 2,000 years through careful diplomacy and the threat of collective action. Earth's Ruthless Retaliation. Left the Galactic Council in silence. Part 5. 6 months passed after the Zelvian War ended. The galaxy settled into an uneasy new normal. Everyone understood that something fundamental had changed, but no one was quite sure what to do about it. The Galactic Council continued to meet, continued to debate, but now there was an empty seat where the Zelvian delegates had once sat. Ambassador Elizabeth Morgan returned to Terminus Prime on a cold morning in October. She walked through the corridors that had once felt hostile, noticing how different things were now. Delegates who had ignored her before now nodded respectfully as she passed. Species that had dismissed humanity now watched her with careful attention. Fear and respect looked very similar, Elizabeth thought. But she would take either one over contempt. She entered the council chambers and walked to the central platform. The massive room was packed with delegates from hundreds of species. Every eye watched her. The silence was total. No one whispered. No one made jokes. They simply waited to hear what humanity had to say. Honored council members, Elizabeth began, her voice clear and steady. Earth returns to this council today, but not as the species that left 6 months ago. We return with certain conditions and expectations. She activated a holographic display showing maps of the former Zelvian territory. First, humanity will maintain a permanent military presence in what was Zelvian space. These forces will ensure stability in the region and protect smaller species from opportunistic expansion. We will not occupy this territory. We will not claim it as our own, but we will guarantee its security. High Chancellor Dravok started to speak, but Elizabeth raised her hand. I'm not finished, Chancellor. Second, Earth requires permanent seats on both the Council Security Committee and the Military Affairs Board. We will have full voting rights on all matters related to galactic security. Third, humanity reserves the right to maintain independent military forces without limitation or council oversight. She looked around the chamber. These are not requests. These are the terms under which Earth will participate in the Council. If you find them acceptable, we can move forward. If not, humanity will continue to operate independently, and you will have no input into our decisions. The choice is yours, Delegate Velnar stood. The Aravan had always been one of the more reasonable voices in the Council. Ambassador Morgan, these terms essentially give humanity veto power over Council military decisions. That is unprecedented. So was destroying an entire colony, Elizabeth replied coldly. The Council had the power to prevent the Zelvian attack. You had the power to respond to it. You did neither. Humanity will not put our security in the hands of a council that has proven unable or unwilling to protect its members. Chancellor Dravok looked around the chamber. He saw fear in many faces. These delegates had watched humanity dismantle a galactic empire in 3 weeks. They knew Earth could do the same to any of them if provoked. I call for a vote, the Chancellor said. All in favor of accepting Earth's terms? The vote was unanimous. Not a single dissenting voice. Earth's terms were accepted in their entirety. Elizabeth nodded. Thank you. Now I propose the Civilian Protection Accord. This treaty will make attacks on civilian populations a crime subject to immediate council intervention. Any species that targets civilians will face the combined response of all council members. No more debates. No more waiting. Immediate action. The accord passed within an hour. No one wanted to give humanity another reason to demonstrate their military capabilities. No one wanted to be the next empire reduced to ruins. After the session ended, Elizabeth walked through the gardens of Terminus Prime. She found herself thinking about New Haven, about the 50,000 people who had died there. Their deaths had changed everything. They had forced humanity to show the galaxy who they really were. She wondered if that was a good thing or a terrible thing. Perhaps it was both. On Earth, Admiral Connor Blake stood in front of the memorial wall. The granite structure stretched for hundreds of meters, every surface covered with names. 50,000 names, every person who had died at New Haven. The memorial stood in Geneva, visible from the building where Earth's government met. Blake was no longer on active duty. He had retired immediately after the fleet returned from Zelvian space. At 59 years old, he had done his part. The fleet was now commanded by younger officers who had learned from his example. His legacy would be forever tied to the destruction of the Zelvian Empire. He ran his fingers over some of the names on the wall. Children who would never grow up. Parents who would never see their kids graduate. People who had just wanted to build a life on a new world. They had deserved better than what happened to them. Admiral Blake. He turned to see War Chief Scarreth standing behind him. The Zelvian looked old and tired. His scales were dull, his posture bent. He wore simple civilian clothes, not the military uniform Blake remembered from intelligence photos. "What are you doing here?" Blake asked quietly. "I came to see the names," Scarreth said. His voice was hoarse. "I came to understand what I destroyed. Your government allowed me to visit as part of the peace negotiations." "I wanted to see," Blake studied him. "And now you've seen. What do you think?" Scarreth stepped closer to the wall, looking at the endless rows of names. "I think I made a terrible mistake. I thought your species was weak because you sought peace. I thought your technology was primitive because you did not use council standards. I thought you would accept the destruction of your colony because you lacked the power to respond." He touched the wall gently. "I was wrong about everything. You were not weak. You were patient. You were not primitive. You were innovative. You were not powerless. You were prepared. And when I pushed you too far, you responded with a fury I never imagined possible." Blake said nothing. He simply waited. "My empire is broken," Scarreth continued. "My people will take generations to recover. Millions died because of the secondary effects of losing our infrastructure. The Zelvian civilization that existed for 300 years is gone, replaced by something smaller and weaker. And it is my fault. I gave the order to attack New Haven. I started this war." "Yes," Blake said simply. "You did." "I came here to apologize," Scarreth said. "I know it means nothing. I know it changes nothing. But I wanted to say it. I am sorry for what I did. I am sorry for every name on this wall." Blake looked at the old warrior. He saw genuine remorse there, real understanding of what had been lost. But it was too late for apologies. "Your remorse is noted, War Chief, but it doesn't bring these people back. It doesn't undo what you did." "I know," Scarreth said. "I just wanted you to know that some of us understand. Some of us learned the lesson you taught. We learned that mercy is not weakness, that patience is not cowardice, that humanity is not to be trifled with." Blake nodded slowly. "Make sure your people remember. Make sure they teach this history to their children. Because if the Zelvians ever threaten humanity again, there will be no warnings, no mercy, no survivors. We will not give you a third chance." "They will remember," Scarreth promised. How could they forget? On Kepler 442b, a new settlement was taking shape. The planet that had been home to New Haven was now home to remembrance. 50,000 new colonists were building their lives here, constructing homes and schools and parks on the same soil where their predecessors had died. But this time, they were not alone. A full battle group orbited the planet. Defensive platforms ringed the colony. Fighter squadrons patrolled constantly. Earth had made sure that what happened to New Haven would never happen again. Senator Frank Cole, Earth's new permanent representative to the Council, visited Remembrance during the settlement's first year. He walked through the streets talking to the families who had chosen to build their lives here. They knew the history of this place. They knew what had happened. But they chose to come anyway, to prove that humanity would not be driven from the stars by fear. Frank stood at a memorial that had been built in the center of the new settlement. It was a simple structure, a fountain surrounded by gardens. Carved into the stone were the words, "They died so that humanity would know its strength." "Never again." A young girl approached him. She could not have been more than 8 years old.
"Senator Cole?"
"My teacher said you work with the aliens. Is it true that they're afraid of us now?" Frank knelt down to her level. "Some of them are, yes. But fear isn't what we want. We want respect. We want them to understand that humans deserve to be treated fairly, and that if they harm our people, there will be consequences. Did we do something bad? the girl asked. My mom says we destroyed a whole empire. Frank thought carefully about his answer. We did what we had to do. The Zelvians killed 50,000 people here, including many children like you. We made sure they could never do that again to anyone. Was it bad? I don't know. It was necessary. Sometimes those are different things, the girl considered this. I hope we never have to do it again. So do I, Frank said. So do I. Across the galaxy, the power dynamics continued to shift. Species that had been bullied by stronger neighbors now sought Earth's protection. Trade agreements were signed. Defense pacts were negotiated. Humanity found itself at the center of a growing alliance of smaller species who saw Earth as a protector rather than a threat.